Please come to the panel, please come to the stage, panel. Gordon Black from Adidas, Emma Cranston from Ozone, and Joe Kinsella from Innovid. Please. So you go there and I'll go at the end.
Oh, actually not. Amazing.
Oh, great. Which is good because now you're sitting in front of the screen so people can't see who you are. So thank you very much. I'm really excited about this. So we're going to get into effectiveness, and I'm excited because I'm going to learn, because I am a journalist who reports on the media industry. I am not an effectiveness expert. I am not a media planner. So I'm going to be asking lots of questions like, what do you mean? What does that mean? So please bear with me. And please, if you have any questions, I'm going to be looking out for you. Just, do one of those. I put on my glasses just so I can see you. But firstly, let's introduce you. So Gordon Black, you're from Adidas. Everyone's heard of Adidas. But what do you do? What's Director of Paid Media Measurement? Briefly, what do you do?
Yeah, great question. So I'm responsible for making sure that every euro is accountable. The job is to not hold back any of our media planning, but hopefully inspire it and just give it confidence. It's specifically about paid media because we have this other slightly complex world of, is it our product, is it sponsorship, with all of that, which has to be accounted for within my role. But it's absolutely kind of just, the purpose of measurement is essentially giving the business confidence to do cool things.
Great, we like cool things. Emma from Ozone, explain for the benefit of anyone who doesn't know, what does Ozone do?
So Ozone is a premium platform, and it's made for brands and produced and made by publishers. So I'm a client service director, so I've got to make sure that all the campaigns run as amazingly and efficiently as they should, and we're reporting on the metrics that really matter. Good.
And Joe Kinsella from Innovid XP. When you call TV Squared, what do you do?
It's Innovid.
It's
Innovid.
Sorry.
Okay.
You just put the accent over the I.
No, it's all good. So for those of you that don't know, TV Squared was acquired by Innovid in February of this year. So previously, you may have seen me sitting on stage, slightly less branded, and I'm happy to see that Mr. Adidas, I live in America, I've lived there for 16 years, so forgive me if I say Adidas, but I also want to point out that I did sync my shoe colour with the brand of media.
Thanks very much.
I think that's an important point. You guys can laugh if you want. Is everyone asleep? Let's get some energy going, Omar.
Thank you. Of course, it's Adidas, Adi being a nickname for Adolf, and good thing they didn't name the company Adolf Das. Anyway, let's talk about effectiveness, not that. So, what I want to ask you, are we getting better at advertising online? It feels like with the fragmentation of media, because audiences are more distributed across different channels, things can get quite expensive as we try to reach people. So the outcome suggests maybe not, but tell me why I could be wrong. Gordon, do you want to go first?
Yeah, please. Definitely. We're definitely getting better. But with that comes loads more pitfalls. There's more opportunity to be worse. What a rubbish answer. But honestly, like the opportunities available to you to kind of be able to set something up, to be able to test and understand it, is it working, has come on so much. We learned this morning, just how the growth in digital has continued. Everyone's using it, and there's so many different ways of using it. Therefore, you can't just say, let's do some digital advertising. We've now had long enough to understand some formats that really work. And it's kind of allowed us to do some great stuff.
Okay, when you say great stuff, how do you measure that? How are you actually defining success?
Yeah, brilliant. The thing that excites me most, the reason I think we've been successful, is the language has moved on from understanding paths of journeys. It's everyone's talking about cause and effect now. I want to say a big thank you to the media and their coverage of Amber Heard and Johnny Depp's trial, because it got everyone discussing the difference between correlation and causation. And I loved it, as a nerd, as somebody who's...
So I don't know what... I felt like I knew what was happening in that trial, but what are you suggesting? What do you mean?
Well, what happened is the evidence of the trial is, Amber Heard had lost out on all of these, a lot of money because she stopped getting roles after certain announcements had happened, but they were able to prove that, those did not actually even correlate, let alone have a causal effect.
Right.
It seems not everyone got caught up in this. I'm disappointed.
Interesting angle.
Let's not willfully talk about that.
So we should learn from Amber Heard when it comes to good media effectiveness, media planning.
We should learn from that trial of with great power and intelligence doesn't always come conclusive outcomes. Because the reality is, it's like these are experts that are paid more than I'll ever dream of, that don't understand these things and misuse data to make their argument. All of us in this room can do that. But what this has kind of got everyone thinking though is the ability to challenge and understand the need to actually prove things, have evidence. Nothing's going to be perfect, but it's now given everyone the right tools to be able to set up safeguards to understand what is and isn't working.
Right, okay. Emma from Ozone, I mean, Ozone started a few years ago as this initiative to do digital ad sales, programmatic ad sales for newspaper publishers, premium publishers, and you've added more media owners over the years since you've been growing and growing. So over that time, how have the success metrics changed for you? And what did you wish you knew maybe 5 years ago that you could tell your future before self today?
I think the way the advertising market has evolved and developed is fantastic, but unfortunately the metrics that we measure with haven't necessarily developed at the same time. And at Ozone, what we try and do is trying to educate people on metrics we should really be focusing on. Sometimes we get so caught up in relying on old ad tech metrics to kind of report on campaigns, but as we know, every single impression is different, and we should have different metrics to measure it. So
what metrics should we throw in the bin right now?
So click-through rate? Well, it actually depends. It depends on what your objective of the campaign is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes for some campaigns that might be relevant, but for other campaigns, when you want awareness, maybe it's not. You need to be looking at brand lift. If you want to gain attention, look at attention metrics. And at Ozone, that's what we very much do. We kind of obviously report on the KPIs that our clients set. We'll also give them more as well. We'll provide them a brand lift study. We'll show them how we've moved the dial on brand lift. We launched Ozone Ad Attention Index, which is our way of looking at every single campaign. We'll measure every single impression of the campaign and say how it's delivered in terms of attention. And it's how we kind of package this up, divide an overall index. As I said, it's something that goes alongside what they set as our KPIs. We're just trying to educate people to really move that dial and how they kind of measure our campaigns. It should be based on business outcomes, not on these old ad tech metrics.
Hear, hear. Beautiful segue. With no prep or planning.
Yeah,
that was impressive, Emma.
Jo, are you saying that somewhat ironically, or did you?
No, I think, TV Squared was probably a little bit ahead of its time. Honestly, we started the company 10 years ago, and it was to measure outcomes and attribution, and people didn't really believe that it was possible, and then we kept doing it. I think so. Maybe just to counter Adidas, yes, we've made huge strides in talking about measurement and attribution and outcomes. The challenge is now becoming everybody, whether it's a Netflix or an Ozone or a Hulu or a Roku or whatever, all want their own, they all want to market their own measurement and outcomes product. And, my argument is always, why do you shouldn't be marking your own homework. You should be trusting in global software technology platforms that are built for scale, that do this stuff all day long. So we've got now with Innovid, creative optimization, and the ad server, we're processing so many billions of impressions every single day. My stance is always let us do this. We're really good at technology. You guys, broadcasters, publishers, are really good at content and really good at helping us kind of reach audiences wherever they are. We now need cross-screen, we need omni-channel, we need cross-device. But I think the effectiveness has helped. I think what's hindering us is Apple, Amazon, Walmart, Google. Everyone's telling you about privacy and that they're keeping you safe. They're not keeping you safe. They're using your data to build up their own first-party data so that they can win. They're realizing just how important ad effectiveness is and they're realizing that they need that data to have competitive advantage in the market. So it's a little bit of a balance, and we're seeing more and more, especially in the US right now, they don't want to use IDs anymore, which means all of this deterministic measurement that we've been able to deliver is potentially at risk if the IP address starts to be obfuscated over the next 2 to 5 years. Apple started, Google will probably follow suit.
Okay, well this is interesting because as everything becomes more digitized, you could potentially have the back end of all forms of digital advertising all through the same DSP, SSP networks. So are we all moving to a system where, you mentioned standardization, so you know we write a lot about the media leader about the possibility of TV measurement with C-flights, where the broadcasters are coming together to develop common standards. There are initiatives like Project Origin, which is even more ambitious, cross-media measurements. So to your point, Joe, do we actually need to develop maybe international forms of standards that everyone just adheres to? And how are we going to do that in order to reach this effectiveness goal?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I think there's much more collaboration in the UK and Europe than there is in America. And you know, in America, it's a bit more of a pissing contest between who's got the biggest budget, who's spending the most on the Oscars or the Super Bowl, and therefore who's got the biggest ego. And I liked, I think it was Samir on the last panel said, you know, leave the egos at the door. I think you guys have done a better job of that in the UK. Being said, you know, standardization to me says slow, years, you know, boring. Here's the deal. If we don't fix this, then, you know, people will start to take their money elsewhere and spend it differently in different places. So I think, you know, we've now got probably about 8,000 advertisers on the platform, and many of them are global, and they're using performance and attribution and outcomes as their measure, right? Yes, they can count, they can understand how many impressions got served, but it's really about what was our return on investment, and giving them the power to say, what KPI do you want? We're not going to stipulate a KPI. We're going to ask you, Mr. Brand, what's the most important thing for you?
That's a good point. Let's ask Mr. Brand.
Mr. Brand.
As you are here for known.
Branding on point also.
Yeah.
Thank you
I
very
did
much.
notice.
It's three-stripe hoodie. Do you see that as Joe sees it in terms of, do you really, one of the questions I had for you was, you know, if you could wave a magic wand, what's the one thing you would change about effectiveness? Is clearly Joe thinks is hot on standardization. Do you see that as the big thing holding you back when it comes to all these different platforms and all the way to optimize on all those different platforms, when actually we should just be more of a level playing field?
Yeah, I think Joe's point's spot on about the big issue being time, how long it takes with standardization. The other thing as well is a lot of that is we think it's a measurement solution. It's a measurement of delivery solution and reach. It's not a measurement of outcomes, and ultimately outcomes is all that matters, which is why you're kind of like, yeah, we should continue to invest. We need to solve these problems, and by exploring it, we'll learn a lot and do things. But ultimately, everybody does need their own unique solution to determine their own outcomes and their own success. So I'd say that's kind of the biggest thing for me is don't get caught up on these slow-moving things that might improve some of the quality of data sets. You need to focus on proving it for yourself. And I think that's a really good point you made as well about, you know, everyone marking their own homework and everything. Like that is definitely an issue. There's a big question of trust. You do need to have something that you are confident of, and really that is just the transparency of the tests that are being done, understanding the limitations of the tests that are being done, because when Meta, Google, you know, mark their own homework, it's with very robust tests, sometimes transparent, sometimes deliberately confusing, so you think you'll just agree to it, but mostly, you know, very good and very robust, but even that's within a closed system. It tends not to be full outcome measurement, so you do need to invest yourself in actually being able to judge your own outcomes, which earlier, one of the sessions, a lot was talked about of the rebirth of MMM and people relying on things
media
like
mix modelling, is that?
Media mix modelling, econometrics, marketing mix modelling. Like that is having a renaissance, but it's only having a renaissance combined with the current developments. You combine it with what you're doing from a test point of view, what you're doing from a planned uplift, being able to measure the brand KPI uplift, calibrate that in your MMM to get your long-term effects. when I say things are getting better, they are, but it is really complex to navigate.
And MMM takes so long. Like our advertisers are making changes in flight, right? They're, especially on the CTV side, they're looking at optimization and saying, okay, this creative didn't work, or this program placement wasn't good. We're going to move it, and we're going to move it this week, not we're going to run a giant model and wait for some post-campaign reporting. You know, again, like it's the instant gratification generation that we're now part of. And certainly, you know, my 13-year-old daughter watches YouTube and TikTok, and we need to be able to move that quick, even if it's tied to outcome. It's not just about unique, unduplicated reach. Yes, we want that too, but it's about, did I sell more product? And if this streaming platform didn't work for me, where else am I going to go with my dollars? How else am I going to spread out my inventory to be most effective?
Emma, you were nodding just then. Let me play devil's advocate to Joe's point just now. Maybe that works in terms of needing to be real-time, always on for certain forms of marketing, but maybe it doesn't for other forms. Do you think it's actually incumbent on maybe agencies, media owners to push back on that demand from maybe advertisers that's growing and growing, will be always on instant feedback?
It's a combination, really. It depends what they're trying to sell and what they're trying to achieve. I think we need to be pushing and asking, you know, if they want to know exactly what's going on, it's good to be kind of report on what's going on in the campaign throughout the campaign, so you can make those adjustments, but also having a review at the end of kind of like what happened at the end is really important too. But I think it's a combination of the metrics that really matter, like using, you know, not just relying on kind of click-through rate, but looking at the holistic view, looking at brand uplift, looking at sales, looking at attention, because maybe it's not a case of you immediately want to sell all the products, but you're building a web brand awareness, so attention might be really important then. So it's looking at what the outcomes are and the metrics, the combination of the metrics within that.
And it's got to be linear and digital. It's got to include linear TV, even though we know it's going away eventually.
Yeah. But maybe not as quickly as...
Any broadcasters in the room? Sorry.
You mentioned...
Mr. Jeff.
You mentioned attention just now as well. I mean, we've had so much discussion this year, it feels like, about attention marketing, attention measurements, whether we can get to, you know, a tradable currency in the future. What's your view on that, Emma?
I think that'd be great. I mean, a tradable currency.
Why would it be great?
It would, because then you're kind of looking at it depends again on the campaign, on what do you want the campaign outcome to be. But I think, you know, looking at attention, looking at ozone, where we know that gaining that consumer engagement, you get that attention. So being in those environments, we definitely see the effectiveness. And actually, we're seeing in performance as well. We're seeing actually across all of our formats that we see we're outperforming all of our benchmarks because we're in these premium environments, gaining that consumer attention. So yes, we can move the dial to, because we can measure attention as well. Maybe there is a place like in the future we have an attention economy too. But again, it depends on the outcome. Is that an exciting prospect for you as an advertiser, Gordon? I mean, you made a face, no?
Yeah, definitely. It's like I'm very much of the belief like kind of not all reach is equal, and anything that kind of gives us a metric to be able to test that is definitely a good thing. The nervousness I have is that, you know, you're never going to get, well, never is very, very wrong. We're not close to having kind of buy-in to a universal metric. So once again, the advantage for me is, well, get the metrics that work for you, get something that you believe in, and work to that. So that's the kind of big one. Like it's so valuable. Any metric that's a better reflection of how consumers are engaging with your actual advertising is definitely a good thing.
This is one of these things I warned you, this is one of the things I don't really understand. So we had it with viewability, and my concern is, what about with attention as well? Once you create that tradable currency, isn't there a risk that it could be gamed? And we end up with a lot of the mistakes that we had with programmatic in the past. Open question.
Absolutely, which is why it's all about outcome measurement, not this intermediary measurement. Like, this intermediary measurement will hopefully get us to outcome measurement. Yeah. Once you have this intermediary metric, you're able to then test and say, well, are we seeing it perform? Are we getting the outcomes that we need off the back of that? But outcome measurement is improved by improving these intermediary measurements.
It's all about test and learn. I think if you test and learn along the way, then you've got the learnings and you become more efficient.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Through so much of today's sessions, we've been talking about talent, One of the things we were considering championing for 2023 in the debates we had in the morning was the so-called talent crisis. And obviously a big part of that is effectiveness and interpreting effectiveness, whether you're buy side, sell side. As talent become, we mentioned about optimizing for different platforms, do you think that talent's become too specialized? And that actually, as we looked at, we began the conversation by talking about needing to take a holistic view, but actually we've got too many specialists looking at too many platforms and isolations and not enough generalists who are able to look across the entire piece. Joe, what do you think?
I think it's about companies making decisions to buy, build, or partner, right? And again, I feel like we've gone into this place of, now there's so much data available, we all want to be data scientists. Not me, to be very clear. My CTO is in the room and he's probably covering his eyes right now in horror. But Blair and I were talking about it earlier, and it's like, just people need to use Excel and be able to interpret the numbers, right? And they need to work closely with an agency that gets it and can have a powerful conversation about how do we change this buy to meet the needs of the advertiser. And I think we make a lot of noise in this industry, don't we? We love just talking about all this stuff rather than just taking action and trying it and having a go. And I think, again, back to the point of walled gardens, it's like everyone is now hiring brands as well, like data scientist teams and everything else. And it's like, well, like your job is to make, Adidas's job is to make fantastic sneakers. Oh, shit, sorry, Mum. Trainers, and partner with Stella McCartney and do cool shit like that, right? And broadcasters, make great programs and great shows, and same for streaming platforms. And I think what we've done is we need a new measurement standard, we need a new currency, and now everybody wants to talk about that. And one of the things I said at an event last week was, you guys make content and let the technology platforms of the future solve for, the metrics that you guys so desperately need. And I think on the talent side, you can go too far the other way, right? Where you just hire giant teams of data scientists. And it's like, if you've got the right platform that serves up the right metrics, that services the right KPIs, you shouldn't need to hire data scientists. You need to work with people that can interpret that data, sit down with the client and say, spend more here, spend less there.
Emma, what do you think, what you just heard?
I think it's a combination, finding the right combination of specialists and generalists. It's, you could say a generalist is quite good because it pulls everybody together and they've got that holistic view of kind of effectiveness across all the specialists, but the specialists be able to push back and say, no, these are the measures that we need to be using, and kind of have that knowledge and that depth of knowledge that a generalist might not have. And I think it's up to us as an industry to kind of help educate both of those people, the generalists and the specialists as well, so they're skilled in both those areas. So I think it's important to have both, a right combination of both.
Right. Gordon?
I love this kind of everyone wants to be a data scientist. It's exactly that. You kind of, for measurement to be successful, you've got people at generally two ends of the spectrum. You've got purist analysts and sometimes data scientists, and then you've got consultants and storytellers, and you need the combination of the both. It's not even as simple as balancing, have some people with these skills, some people with these skills. You need the combination of them both to actually be able to kind of make decisions, because the purest data scientist analyst will produce you a model that's really robust and concrete, but probably absolute nonsense, or hasn't considered this, or hasn't considered what's relevant for you. The consultant, the storyteller, will know what you want to hear and will be able to kind of engineer a story that gets you there, but won't necessarily actually back that up with the robust story. So it's really challenging that the talent you really ideally have is pretty unique and special, and there's loads of great initiatives and there's loads of great training out there that is upskilling people, and we're getting people to understand it, but then there's more pitfalls along the way. There's to the specialist training, every partner has a slightly different test that they've coined themselves that you get trained up on, and you learn that jargon, and it makes it all very confusing. So for me, we've got two specialists. We need more people understanding a slightly level up specialism of the general principles of measurement, rather than getting caught up in and really specialist knowledge. The one to watch out for me is everyone's now talking about causal impact analysis, which is causal effect.
What
I'll keep
is
using
that
cause
for
and
people who don't know?
It's, to be honest, for me, it's the jargon is the new machine learning. When somebody will solve something for you with machine learning, causal impact analysis is a great in principle. It's being able to isolate, running tests, but being able to isolate what's actually caused the change by running a model saying what would have happened otherwise. Does it pass the sniff test? Just everyone make sure you're thinking, do I actually believe that this is making sense? Because there's a good chance that that model could be redeveloped in a different way and give you a completely different answer. You really need to check that you're asking the right questions to be able to kind of have any confidence in the outputs coming out of these things.
Right. Okay, good. I'm gonna open it up to the floor. Hopefully you have some questions. Oh, we've got loads of questions already. I was gonna do a filler question, but I won't. So
he said he was going to ask me a question. Don't ask Jeff Eales from Sky. Don't give him the mic.
We've got 2 questions here.
I don't need a mic.
No, that's true.
We've got we've got 2 here.
See, I knew this was.
So I can speak nice and quietly now.
Oh.
So fascinating discussion. So this is Jeff Eales from Sky. I don't know whether to be very, very nervous or very, very happy, because I think you've described a world where I could just pile you tons of data without any standardization on it. Provided it works, I get some money. I think that's what you've described. It's not entirely the world that I thought we were in. I thought we were in a world of brand safety, standardization, making sure the data was correct, and making sure that we tend to do everything the same way so we can be judged the same way. So I'm kind of split between 2. I think you're erring on the side of chaos as opposed to on the side of organization. Where should I be thinking?
I think Origin has obviously been taking a few years, but it's definitely taking pace now. And I think this is a good example of kind of like standardization across both display and digital as well, really bringing together digital and broadcast media. It's definitely taking place, and there's going to be tests next year. So I think Origin will definitely help give that standardization framework. That's not going to necessarily replace like the Barb, the PAMCO, the ISPOS, but it's just going to underpin it to give us that, all of those different specialist industry measurements will just get better and richer, and we'll all have that kind of standardized framework which we can have all work to. So for me, I think that we are going in that direction, and it's getting there.
Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Well, sort of. Seriously, I mean, the difficulty is that's exactly the position we're in, and we just probably need to back both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because we've got to get on. I'm with Joe. Time is pressing.
Oh yeah.
We need to get on, but we also must. I don't think we should forget where our roots are, which is doing things correctly and making sure the viewer experience is safe.
Yeah.
And I think it will come down to the advertiser, Jeff. So I think in a lot of cases, we see advertisers wanting to own the relationship with the measurement company. They want to own that in case their agency of record changes. They want to make sure that they have the history and everything else. But I think it's a balance between we're going to have direct-to-consumer advertisers that want to race ahead, and then we're going to have brands that actually move more slowly. In parallel, we're going to build out those standards as it goes, right, and try and do the best thing for the industry. Certainly what I see in the US is that everyone's pissed off at Nielsen. No one wants to talk about a GRP, and now we've got to create, unicorn, a new currency from somewhere, which, you guys have done a better job of that here than we have. So, I'm not all against standards. I'm just saying we need to do it in parallel. It'll come down to a particular advertiser, depending on if they care about standards for their business. But actually what we see is once people see the results, they're like, okay, I'm happy with this. Let's keep going.
Yeah, interesting how there was never a Barb version in the US. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Chap there in the deep red shirt has a question, and then there was one over here as well.
Thank you for that. I'm Jonathan Greaves, Sky. An old Insight director once told me that the standards that you would have in academia are not the same standards that you'll have in media. What's your view on trust in terms of your area, in terms of trust in statistical significance, and how you compare that against standards that you have in other forms of statistics?
I'm going to give you a quote from my CIO. All models are wrong. Some models are useful.
Yep, completely agree, but also, like, the academia analysis is actually often less robust than the commercial analysis that we do, so it's actually quite often the opposite way around. So that's the other thing, is kind of the standard is not the assumption that you'll get people that are shit hot in academia and in education. It is quite the opposite. The access to data that you can have in the commercial world is much stronger, but you will be producing something that's wrong. Just how wrong are you comfortable with?
And don't let perfect get in the way of good enough, right? If it's moving up until the right and you're selling more shit, just keep going.
You're shaking your head. Sorry, the questioner, you were shaking your head just now. Does that mean you disagree?
I was agreeing, yeah, I was agreeing.
Okay.
Especially the selling more shit.
There's a question from the man in the white t-shirt here. Please do raise your hand if you have a question.
Hi, Curtis Weir from Publicis Media. Question about attribution. What credit do you attribute to media agencies in improving effectiveness and making media work harder than ever?
Come on, be candid.
That's a leading question. Depends on the agency. We have amazing agency relationships with publicists at Innovid. Some agencies are the bane of my existence.
Which ones?
Oh, couldn't possibly comment. So, and again, super interesting, the difference between the agency relationship in the UK versus the agency relationship in the US. The agency in the UK is considered godlike in its status. And, oh, I can't do that unless my agency says so. And in the US, we have so many more brand direct relationships because they want to own their own data. They want to interact with their own data. And then they bring the agency in and say, you're going to use this platform and you're going to make these optimizations, or you're going to change the audience mix, or you're going to change the platform so that we can get more reach here. So I think it really does depend. I'm not just saying that to avoid the question.
Sorry, just to clarify, you don't think either one of those relationships is better? You don't think that the media agency should be kind of guiding the brand?
No, my team's here, and if I don't say this, they'll kick my ass. I think brand direct is always better. I think agencies slow down the process, they talk too much, they charge too much money, and they all talk about testing and learning. And let's just execute it. Let's run the campaign, let's measure it, let's see what happened, report on it, and change it or not. And I think media agencies are in a really tough spot, right? Margins get squeezed, they've got thousands of people, they've got literally hundreds of vendor partners that they work with, and they're being pulled all over the place. So I don't envy the media agency. But what I encourage is that there's more collaboration where the brand direct leans in to cross-platform measurement and says, we don't want our media agency stitching all of this together and then presenting us with a PowerPoint at the end of 6 weeks. We want to log into a platform and see, in as close to real time as possible, how our stuff is performing. I think that has to be the future.
I think it's agree to a point, but I think it's the combination of working with our agencies, not kind of against them. We work very much in partnership with our agencies. And yes, there's, you know, the squeeze of talent, especially agency side, so we're there to help them as well. What can we do to help our agencies, to help their clients? So it's very much for us, it's a combination of the partnership between the three of us that's get the most effective results, and also giving them the tools to help them achieve those results as well. So obviously at Ozone we have the wealth of our first party data, totally unrivaled in market, and we've put this all into the Ozone Ad Manager dashboard, which we give to our agencies and clients so they can see all of our data at their fingertips. And we're not saying if you use that, you've got to buy into Ozone, but obviously that would help. But it was, we're just saying we just want to help them plan help them plan better planning really, to get better outcomes, which is obviously what we're all after.
Yeah.
We've only got a minute left. I want to make sure we get to the questioner here in the cream grey jumper because we're waiting patiently.
Thanks. I would go with beige personally. I'm Vince from Kantar, so big market research agency. We do a lot of measurement of loads of things. Dan and I specifically in media, and I'm across brand and innovation. And my question comes from that because today's obviously all about media, and we've spoken about things things like attention, speed, platforms like TikTok. You know, we're looking at things for seconds now rather than minutes. But in brand, I consult a lot on thinking about short-term and mid-term and long-term at the same time. And obviously media is generally focused on the shorter term. So my question to the panel, when it comes to short-termism and, you know, in January building, or December building your strategy, so Q4 building your strategy for next year, how do you factor in the fact that things are going to change constantly with the media and so on, when you've set out this big plan for 2023, 2025, so on?
Want to take that? Yeah. Danger of moving too slowly.
You've got to stick to your principles of defining success, and so to avoid short-termism, it's having the commitment of, if your campaign's goal is to sustain your brand and grow in the long term, you still have to define your success metric as being that brand KPI, and that opens up a whole kind of worms I won't get onto. But for me, it's the thing is just stick to your guns. It's define success and run your campaigns that way. If that means tough conversations of having to postpone things, delay things, or change your ambitions, fine, but stick to your guns and keep defining success.
Great answer.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Joe. Wonderful panel. Thank you, audience. Very good questions. Really appreciate it. Please do stick around after the break, where we'll get to what the media leader should champion in 2023. Really looking forward to that too. Thank you very much. Thank you.